Hey, happy Black Friday, everybody. We're filming this the day after Thanksgiving here at the Red Barn. I hope everybody had a great holiday and is having a great holiday weekend. Sorry for last week. I didn't get a video done. I was busy with a bunch of stuff. Lots and lots of planning, lots and lots of thinking based on some next steps that I got to make here with the Ferrari 360 powered Porsche 914. So I didn't really have anything of note, and sorry, I skipped a week. Please forgive me. You can show me that you're okay with that by hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, and help me out in those ways if you would. So this week, like I said, a bunch of planning stuff, a little bit of trying some things on for size, and if you watch all the way to the end, you'll get a teeny glimpse and a few hints on the unbelievably awesome project car. I'm filming this at the end of the week, and I'm standing right here looking at it, and I'm not going to show it to you, but it is top 3 cars for me of all times. Yeah, so watch till the end, and I'm sorry to tease you like that. I'm working with the owner on some stuff, but you'll be seeing a little bit more about this car in the future. Anyway, some planning, a little bit of progress on the Ferrari car, and I hope you enjoy. Well, I'm going to take a break from the wiring for a bit and do something that I need to do at some point, and I figured I might as well do it now, and that is to get the 911 steering column into the car. And for those of you that may not know, here's the comparison. This is the 914 steering column, essentially very Volkswagen-y. Key over here, just like you'd expect it. And this is a 911 steering column. But you can see here the key, the iconic key on the left for the 911, and this is also what came in the 914-6, was this kind of an ignition thing. It's a different cover and all that, and it's very cool. It's a great upgrade to do, and so I'm going to do it. And what you can see is this mounts with these 4 bolts on a plate. This mounts in a completely different way. So what I'm going to do now is remove all the unnecessary parts here, and where did it go? It's around here someplace. I sliced, this is not yet prepared, but I sliced this off of a junk steering column, and with this bracket removed and this bracket removed, I'm not sure I can actually use this or if I need to just slice these off and weld it directly to the side here, but you get the idea. This will go on and serve as the mount for that steering column. So I'm going to go ahead and get all these brackets taken off of here and get going on this. Well, I'm going to have to put a pin in working on this element of the build, and let me tell you why. So as you can see, this thing is loose, right? And then you'd think, oh, there's a bearing in there. Just replace the bearing or the bushing. Well, yeah, there is a bushing. This is, and I'm still chasing down the details, but this happens to be a particular year model steering column that takes this bushing that runs down in here. And I've just started doing the research. It looks like there might be a quick fix approach to it, but the factory part is this little sheet metal kind of stamped piece of metal that runs down in here around the steering shaft. And then there's a spring that helps hold it in place backed up against the steering wheel. But that piece of stamped sheet metal bushing is like $285 from, new from Porsche. Apparently you can still get them. I guess they're impossible to find used because they wear out and all that good stuff. So before I get too crazy with this, I'm going to make sure that I understand exactly what I need to do to get this thing to locate correctly and not have any play in it. So I'm going to put that on hold while I chase all that stuff down. So that's it for the steering column for now. Okay, kind of a boring thing, but necessary. I have to make room in the Red Barn for a very special project car that's coming in. You'll see that when it gets here. But what that means is I got to move the Ferrari 914. I got to move it. And if you recall from one of the earlier episodes when I did the axles, you know that these things have serious deflection, well, angular situation when the car's in full droop. And what is happening is this boot was interfering with the inside of the trailing arm, right? This slides into the trailing arm. Obviously, it picks up the splines here, pick up the hub, but this is inside the trailing arm. I'll show you that in a second. And because this boot that I used or ordered, this is what I have on the LS car, and it's a completely different angular situation, but this boot is the same dimension all the way out, and then it drops in. And because of all the angle I pick up, I need to go with a different boot. I need to go with one that tapers, and this is the best I can get. And what you'll see is I swapped it on one axle already. This is at full droop, and what you can see is this one barely touches on the inside of that first fold. It almost touches right there, but that doesn't matter because, as I said, this is full droop. But the problem was with those other ones, they were contacting that part of the trailing arm even when they were at ride height, so they were not going to work. So I have to switch that boot out, and I have to put the axles back in the car because, again, from before, you'll remember, you don't want to roll your Porsche around without axles through those bearings in the trailing arms because it can damage the bearings. So I might as well, instead of just putting this back together temporarily, I might as well fix this and be done with it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Man, CB grease is messy, but that got done. And now you can see, if I take you down in there, plenty of clearance. And even when it goes into full droop, it's fine. It's not smashing the boot, you know, anywhere near like it did the other one. So there we go. That is done, and the car is moved because I got a big space here. Well, other than NASCAR toy model, but wait till you see what's going to show up here next. Okay, major decision made. I have selected the connectors and started procuring them. These are the connectors that are going to go from the ECU through the firewall into the engine compartment, and I have decided to use the same product that I used on the LS build, and that is these are mil-spec connectors. And they're, I don't know, let's call it one click down from the Deutsch Autosport series of connectors. And while I would have loved to have had all Autosport stuff, it's like twice as expensive. So this connector set, which is the connector, the pins, in the case of this particular one, I got the back shells, which by the way are the items that screw onto the back of the shell. And this is where the heat shrink boot will grab onto, you know, either a straight boot or a 90, depending upon the application. But this kit came with the back shells. I got these nut plates, which are super cool for getting them mounted, right? I just drill the appropriate size hole in the firewall, and then this does a super tidy job of securing that little flanged connector to the car, right? And this side being the side that'll, you know, go to the engine harness and then attach onto this. But this particular connector was, you know, all the pins, obviously, right? Little installation tool. This was, I think, $192, and I think the Deutsch Autosport version of this was something like $450, something like that. Really expensive. Super awesome quality, all that good stuff, don't get me wrong, but it's just, you know, this is overkill enough, and that would be super overkill. And the real advantage of these things is, aside from them being cool and quite purposeful looking and all that, they are more weatherproof than the plastic kinds of OEM connectors. But more importantly than that is that OEM connectors are used for like single digit number of cycles, you know, taking them apart, putting them together. They're really not designed to be disassembled and reassembled. And you can imagine in a race car application, you know, a motor's coming in and out, or a fuel system's coming in and out, or a fuel pump's coming in and out, and those connectors are being disassembled and reassembled all the time. So repeat usage is critical in that application, and I figure why not? They look the part. I love them. Very, you know, very style pointsy. But what's kind of cool about them too is you can't put them together the wrong way. Just if you haven't ever seen one of these things, they're keyed in a particular way. Obviously, you want the pins to match and have the wires go the right way. But what's kind of neat is when you go to put them together, you know, they won't go together until they line up properly, and then it snaps into the right location. But then you can see there's this blue stripe, and there's a couple locations in that shell where there's a hole. And there's a couple locations on this shell where there's a pin. And you can see that pin's painted blue and that stripe's painted blue. And you can imagine where this is going. When you put it together and start to assemble it, it screws together. You can see now it's going all the way in. And let me line you up with one of those holes. And you can see that once that's put together, you can see that the blue stripe is not interrupted anymore. The top of the pin is painted blue. So you can quickly glance down, and if you see something like that, you know that that connector is not fully engaged and locked in place. And obviously when you're working on it, you can probably hear that it clicks, you can feel it lock in, but there's also a visual, which is super cool. So repeatability, they look awesome. They're, I'll say, reasonably priced. And for this level of build, you know, street car-ish, overkill, but not completely auto sport connector overkill. So there is the connector. And this is a 41 position, number 20 or 20 sized terminal. So these are all the pins and sockets for these. And this will service, this connector and the other one I have coming will take care of everything I need to run the motor. But I'll probably also have a third one that's purely the rear chassis stuff, like tail lights, brake lights, turn signals. Maybe there's a couple of other things I'm thinking about that I'll get to later. But these are number 20 or size 20 terminals. And that's good for the 20 gauge, 18 gauge wires that are most of the harness. The other one I have coming, which isn't here yet, I got it from a different supplier, is a 26 positions of number 20 and 6 positions of number 12. And the number 12 is suitable for this big deal high amperage stuff. So much larger pin, much more amperage capability. And I have 6 positions. I only need to pass 4 of these through it. All right, we're out of sequence here a little bit, but that's because the other connectors just showed up this morning, and I thought you might like seeing the difference. But there is the, you know, that's the large size 12 contacts there in the middle, 6 positions for that, even though I only need 4. You don't get to spec exactly what you want with these connectors. They come, you know, this way. So I'm gonna have a couple of spare spots in this, most likely. But then the other things that are kind of cool that showed up is, this is an unrecovered heat shrink boot for this connector. And you think, really? That's going to shrink all the way down and grab a hold of however many wires are coming out of here? And the answer is yes. And what's really nice about these is you don't have to think ahead when you're building your harness, meaning this thing's big enough that it can fit over the connector from this direction, and then on it goes. And if you recall that back shell that screws on here, well, this thicker part of the boot comes down and grabs onto that back shell, and you have an absolutely waterproof seal there between the harness and your connector. And then the other thing that I ordered were, these are essentially back shells for this part of the harness, right? The actual standard AMP Super Seal connectors. Now remember, because I'm going to have a bulkhead connector, I'm going to have to cut all of these wires at the appropriate length that go from the ECU up to the connector on the firewall. And at that point, I'll have the chance to slip these back shells over the harness, and maybe a little hard to see because I can't do it right now, but this back shell lives right here on the harness, with obviously with the wires going through it, and it provides the same lip for a heat shrink boot to grab hold here and seal down against the harness. So yeah, this is on the inside of the car, so again, a little bit overkill, but it provides a lot of really good strain relief. What you don't want is when the harness is being moved around, you don't want any strain happening to the wires as they enter the connector. And when you get these back shells on here and get the boot on here, this stuff seals down to be pretty rigid and provides a complete support structure between these back shells and the harness. And so the wires aren't taking the load the boots are taking the load. Obviously very effective, proven in motorsports, etc., etc. So I got back shells for all of my AMP Super Seals. This one doesn't get one because it's an oddball, if you want to call it sort of non-standard kind of a connector. And anyway, so this I will just use some Raychem SCL, which is heat shrink tubing that seals down, it recovers down, and is rigid. And so I'll just put some on here and support this as best I can once this part's done. So I got all the back shells, I got my 2 main harness connectors. What else do I have? I have a plan for where these things are going to go. So now the fun part becomes get the ECU placed, get the measurements, and slice into this beautiful wiring harness and cut it basically, sever every one of these wires and start building the harness that goes from the ECU to the bulkhead connector. So I got to get these mounted on the car too. So progress. But anyway, there you go. So those are my connectors. And now to determine exactly where in the car they're going to go. Super exciting, I know, but like I said, lots of planning stuff at this point. So these are just the 2 nut plates sort of taped in place where I think I'm going to do this. And this is the one that's going to carry the power cables, which come out of that side of the ECU. So this is the ECU sort of sitting in place. This is where the 25 amp wires come out. And so they'll route under here, and then I want them to, not pass over, cross over stuff. So the larger connector is going to go out here. There's a nice flat spot on the firewall there too. This is the smaller connector. I just put the back shell on here. And then what I'm wondering is, because of this step out in the inner firewall, I was just looking at how much space I'm going to need, because this is going to need a 90 coming out of it. The boot will take the wires will come out and drop 90 degrees. And according to my precise calculations, I'm going to want about 2 inches for the connector body and for the boot once it's all recovered down, for all the wires to come out and go 90 degrees. And when I look at that measurement, 2 inches puts me right just outside of this, which is perfect. So that 90 will come down and have plenty of room to make a nice soft bend and get back to the ECU. This is almost exactly like it looks in LS. Here's a picture of the LS and how it went. Now notice that's a different, it's the same, it's a mil-spec connector under all there, same connector, but yeah, same kind of setup, slightly different firewall. That's the custom firewall on the LS, but you get the idea. And then, so, it's that far in from the edge of the car, but I'm looking at this location here over. And the reason that that's all important is when you look at where that puts it, puts the wires coming through just above that weld seam, outside of the header, which is important. So I'm going to probably have to have a heat shield there anyway, because the battery's going to be in here. Wires are going to come up across, and then the wires are going to go up in front of the valve cover, or excuse me, the timing belt cover, and run into the center of the V and then come out like that, kind of like this fake wire planning that I've been doing. I've also decided I'm going to move the fuel pressure regulator to the other side so that I have more, I think I'm going to do that. So I have, less clutter on this side, because it's going to be the battery, the wires, and all that. I don't know, we'll see. I might end up moving that. Okay, back in the car to plan out this interior component of the harness, and just like in planning the engine harness, use the same technique of this nylon rope, and I just have a leg for each of the connectors, A through E, worked out where I want the branch points to be. These can all come into here, and then I can have one leg that comes back. This leg splits off for the 425 amp leads, and it comes back and then up onto the firewall where I'll have the 1, 2 nut plates that I had earlier, and then that third one's going to go out here, and I've just labeled these for the passenger side of the car, the middle, and the driver's side. Doesn't really matter, just need to keep them organized. And so yeah, these two will be all the engine function, and then this third one, as I mentioned earlier, will be for the rear chassis stuff and maybe other non-engine related circuits that run to the back of the car. And now with this thing modeled up, I can just pull it out, and I've got all my distances and labels, and I can go lay this up against the harness and get my distances and slice up my brand new wiring. and start building out the interior component of this ECU to firewall wiring. And I think what I'm going to do, though, is save that for next time. That's going to be an interesting, you know, break out the wiring tools and all the cool crimpers and all that great stuff. So for now, I'm going to call it for this episode. I hope y'all are enjoying this and that everybody's having a safe and happy holiday season. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and all that great stuff. And we'll talk to y'all again real soon. Take care. Bye-bye.